Okay, so today I am going to be interviewing my mom, Erin Scalisi, about what life was like for her during the time of the Great Recession between 2007 and 2009. And so we have a list of questions for you I'm going to be asking. And so the first one is, what is your full name?
Erin Scalisi.
Well, we know that. Where are you from?
Where was I born?
I guess these are just required questions.
I'm from Huntington Woods, Michigan.
And how old were you in 2009?
Mm, what year is it? 29?
Um, well, you were born in 77, 32 maybe? Or,
32.
well, yeah, well, towards the end of the year. Um, so these are going to be, the first section is going to be some before the event questions. And so, what was your financial life like before the Great Recession, like finding or keeping a job?
I had a job, so there was no problem finding or keeping one. How old was I then?
In 2007?
Mm-hmm.
2007, I
It
think
was
you'd be
10 years ago.
30. Yeah.
So I would be 29.
Yeah.
I had two jobs, and I was a manager of a company during the day, and I would bartend at night. And I would also waitress at another restaurant part time on the side.
At Nello's.
Mm-hmm.
And what was finding or buying a home like?
Um, let's see. During that time, I rented, and I I rented for the years that you're speaking about, but because of the recession, I was able to buy a house very cheap
Yeah.
eventually, but not for a year or two later.
Okay, and what do you think yours and society's spending habits were like?
Um, for me, for the type of job I had, for like bartending and waitressing, and also having the management of the bar during the day when it was closed, um, my spending habits were mostly towards bills. And I was also a single mom, so I had to make sure that I worked as much as I could and pay as many bills as I could with all the money I made because I didn't have anybody else to depend on to help me split the cost. So my spending habits were frugal because I wasn't able to do much more than take care of you and pay the bills.
Yeah. And did you have any governmental actions in the economy?
What does that mean?
Um,
Governmental actions.
it just as one of the questions, governmental actions in the economy.
Probably not, because I don't have
Yeah.
any idea what that means.
um, and were you overly worried about the health of the economy?
um, I wasn't really worried about it until probably after 2009 when stuff started crashing so bad. People's values of their homes started crashing so bad that you realize that there's a lot of people that paid a certain amount of money for their home, but their homes were no longer being valued at that amount of money, and they still had to pay for a value of a home that was no longer at that value, which is where I got lucky because I was able to buy a home at the lower valued price and get something that I could afford. I
Yeah.
wouldn't have been able to afford the home I bought had it been 5 years prior to that.
Yeah. And had you experienced economic hardships prior to 2007?
I think being a single mom, you experience a lot of hardships, but I've never been on any type of assistance programs. So I think that whatever hardships I faced, I pushed through by working a lot as much as I could. And I made sure that I was always working extra if available to make sure that I didn't fall victim to economic hardships.
Yeah. And so the next portion of questions is going to be when the Great Recession happened. So this will be from December 2007 until June 2009. And and this makes it the longest recession since World War II. So, how did you discover that our nation was facing a severe economic situation?
Probably by what I just said. With all the people talking, especially my own mother talking to me about like the values of homes and how homes were losing their value, and explaining to me how it happened, and there were banks that were giving out loans to people that really shouldn't have them, and they were also letting people refinance their homes and take the money out of the home they'd already paid in. So I don't know if you guys have talked about this in your class that much, but the biggest issue was that these banks had loosened up their restrictions so much that if I own a home, let's say I bought a house for $100,000, and I paid for it for 10 years, and I got it down to I only owed $50,000, well, then I could go to the bank during the recession, especially. Well, this is how the recession started, but I could go to the bank prior to and say, I want to refinance my house, and all that $50,000 that I paid, I want it back, and I want to start paying over on this house again. And they'll say, okay, here's your $50,000, and now you owe $100,000 on this house again. Well, I shouldn't owe what I started, and I'm paying a ton of interest. So I learned a lot about what was going on because the banks were being too relaxed with how they were letting people take money. The next problem was the banks were letting people take money for their house beyond what it was valued at. So let's say I own a house that's $100,000 and I pay it down to $50,000, but I go to the bank and say, I want to borrow $100,000 against my home. Say, okay, here's your check for $100,000. Now you owe $150,000 on this home that isn't valued at $150,000. And that's how people started getting in trouble. They started borrowing against their homes and more that their homes were worth, and the banks were allowing it. And you know what happened? People didn't pay the money back. And now you have all these homes that are being foreclosed on because people are paying sometimes one mortgage, sometimes two mortgages, sometimes three mortgages on a house. You're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to take the money out of your home unless you need to take a little bit out to improve your home. People were improving their homes. They were taking money out to have fun or buy stuff and be irresponsible.
Yeah, and I think this is stuff we actually did talk about in history today. I think people just didn't realize that even though you were taking out more money than, and this is just my opinion, or this is what I think from what you've told me, what it seems like is people were taking out more money than they should have, but they didn't realize that that meant that they would have to owe more than they originally
No,
had
they
to
knew. They were just taking it because the bank said they could have it.
pay. Oh.
The banks are not your friends. If like this is one thing that
When
people
Bernie didn't like the banks.
this is what people don't understand, especially my sister Becky, is that her house she should have had almost paid off. She kept taking the money out of it that she paid on it, and then she kept taking more, and they kept letting her take more. She ended up owing on a house that should have been paid off. She bought it for $79,000, and she ended up owing close to $200,000 on that house. A house that she should have owed almost nothing on.
More than double than she
More than
originally owed.
double. And then she ended up giving it back to the bank because she couldn't afford it. So that house, and then you know what happened? Somebody turned around and bought that house for probably $30,000 because the bank couldn't sell it for what she owed on it. So it's a big crisis. Everybody got screwed. And then the banks finally tightened up on who they were giving money to and who they were letting take money out of their homes for and what they were taking it out for. And unfortunately, it sounds like with the new administration, the Trump administration, that they'd like to relax those laws again and let people start taking all sorts of money out again, which is unfortunate because we're not responsible enough as a country to have relaxed restrictions. We need restrictions
I
because we
think we
don't
take
know.
advantage of a lot of the
Absolutely.
stuff.
Absolutely. It's like a kid in a candy store and someone says, "Here, it's free. Go get whatever you want."
That's a great example. Some of these questions I might skip over because you kind of already covered them, like loss of job or difficulty finding work. I don't. Yeah, you didn't have that. Loss of home, no's. Well, this one's an interesting one. Loss of. Did you have any loss of savings or for retirement or otherwise?
Well, I didn't have a retirement until after that time, and my retirement is through your stepdad, Chris. So the only retirement that I have that I built that I saved towards was just the government taking Social Security out of my paychecks. But Chris has a retirement fund, and we didn't have to borrow against it then because we weren't together. So not at that time.
And did you have a reduction of income or hours at work?
Yes. So people definitely stopped spending. As somebody who makes tips, people were definitely didn't go out as much and didn't want to spend as much and didn't want to tip as well. So you could tell that you could tell when people got paid every other week because you'd see them every other week versus
Yeah.
seeing them all the time. And customers that we used to see, you know, 4 times a week, we'd see 4 times a month, then 2 times a month, and sometimes just once in a while. So yeah, definitely took a hit there. That's why I worked a lot extra to make sure that I wasn't being affected. But you have to work more to earn less.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what happened to the people selling homes is they had to work harder with all these homes that were foreclosed on to make less money because they were selling these houses for almost nothing, very cheap. So
And so what was your emotional response did you and your family have to the severe economic situation?
it wasn't very emotional. It was just you feel like it's an unfortunate thing that people are allowed to screw themselves up like that and take money that they more money than they're supposed to have there. It's called living beyond your means, and people were living way beyond their means, and they should have never been allowed to take that much money out against their homes because a lot of these people now don't own homes. They rent homes and they've lost their their place. Now it's not theirs anymore, it's someone else's. So I mean that's the only emotional response I have to it is that it's too bad that they were allowed to do that.
Yeah, and it seems like, people just you would most likely be okay getting through this time as long as you were careful about, with your was it refinancing on your homes with where you get more money than you should have, like being careful about that, making sure you didn't.
The bank should have never let people
Well,
take money
yeah.
out like that.
So the banks basically just screwed everyone over who did that.
Yep.
And what economic decisions did you and your family make response to this severe economic situation?
Well, just what I talked about before, I just worked more to compensate for the lack of customers that I had before. I feel like people used to spend their money way more free. They're way free with how they spent money, and then it was a good lesson for everybody to learn not to just spend money without thinking first.
Yeah. Like obviously I'm a strong and I'm pretty sure you are too, strong I'm a strong believer in people having their freedoms as human beings, but I think it just depends on what freedoms you come up with and what you give people. And, like giving people the freedom to take more money than they should have.
Well, the government should be regulating that, and the government relaxed their guidelines to let people take, and that was not a good thing.
Yeah.
So,
And What happened to your extended family, friends, and neighbors during the Recession, and how did this impact you?
Well, I know both of my parents lost a ton of money in the stock market because the auto industry stocks crashed and the auto industries needed to be bailed out. And I know that this is really complicated, but there's a rule when you invest money, you shouldn't put, it's called putting all your eggs in one basket. And I know that one of my family members had all their stock in Ford, and Ford lost, the stock bottomed out, and it was very upsetting. That was their life saving, or their retirement poured into that. The only good thing is that everybody but Ford, GM, Chrysler, they were bailed out by Obama, and their stocks are now worth money. They've recovered, but Ford didn't need to be bailed out, and Ford recovered on its own. And the Ford stocks are doing probably just as good, if not better, than they did before. So that money was recovered, but unfortunately, it almost went away before it came back. So it was very scary for a lot of people because a lot of the money that they invested into their future all of a sudden was almost gone. And I know that my dad lost a lot of money that way too.
And so this is the third portion of our questions, I believe. Yep, there are 5 portions, so this is our third one. This is about our government reacts. So, the first question is, what did you think of President George W. Bush and the Congress's reaction to the Great Recession?
I don't really have an opinion on that because I don't really remember. Um, I'm not well versed in George W. Bush so much as I am what came after him, which was Obama,
Yeah.
Who really saved the economy.
Yeah, I love Obama. And what did you think of? Oh well, speaking of Barack Obama, what did you think of President Barack Obama's and the Congress's reaction to the Great Recession?
Well, I think that one of the best things that Barack Obama did was that he saved the auto industry, which is such a big deal, especially living here in Michigan and near Detroit, the Motor City. And I think that he also put some very heavy restrictions on how banks were able to lend money out. And he spent a lot of time making sure that people weren't able to go out and spend irresponsibly, that you have to be able to afford what you're borrowing. You need to be able to pay back what you're borrowing, and that you're not able to take something and just call it a loss if you can't afford it. The government can't afford the loss, and the person can't afford the loss. Nobody can afford a loss. So if you need to borrow money, there needs to be a purpose for it, and you need to be able to pay it back over time. So he did a really good job of making sure that people were able to do that, in addition to saving the auto industry.
And how did you feel about financial bailout given to the banking industry?
Um, hmm, that's a tough one because I feel like the banks allowed the people to borrow against their home. The bank, I feel like, even though the restrictions were light, they were loose, the banks should have known better than to let people borrow all this money. And I feel like the banks are the ones that are at fault for screwing people up. And it's such a complicated, tangled web because the banks were selling people's mortgages, and it gets really difficult to understand. It's many more interviews and conversations, but I don't think much of the banks. I think they really are the root of all evil. They really screw people up.
And this one we've pretty much covered already, but how did you feel about financial bailout given to the automotive industry?
Um, I think it was exactly what we needed. I mean, it seems like the auto industry didn't quite ever expect technology to be as prominent as it was, and because they had to start making better cars and less of them, so people can have a good car and not need to buy a new one every 2 years. And people don't need to buy cars as often as they used to. It used to be every like 3 to 5 years people needed a new car, and now they don't. So I think that the auto industry needed to revamp how they were doing things and how many products they were trying to put out and how many good products they were trying to put out. And I think that the bailout helped them to reformulate how they did things, and I think it was a great thing. I think it was a wonderful thing that happened for the car companies.
And this is the last question in this section. How did you feel about the expansion of entitlement programs during the Great Depression? And some of adding on to it said unemployment benefits, expansion of food assistance, etc.
Mm-hmm. I don't really have too much of an opinion on it because I've never taken any of these programs. The only opinion I have on it is that I hope that the people that are getting these are getting them to better themselves, and I hope that the government offers a lot of programs for people when they take assistance. So I hope that the government is doing their part by making sure people are going to these classes, learning a trade, getting a job, so they don't have to be dependent on the government, because I think that people need to know how to take care of themselves. And if you need help, that's what it's there for, and I think you have every right to get that help. But at the same time, you have every right to help yourself too. And when the government offers you assistance and education, that's a blessing, and you should take it.
And this is the fourth section. This is really short. Present day questions. What do you believe is our nation's greatest economic concern?
What is our greatest economic concern? That's really a tough question to answer right now. I really don't know the answer to it. No, the banks have done a better job at. I guess my biggest concern is that they are going to loosen the regulations on the banks again, so the banks can start giving away money again, which can set us right back into a recession. So I guess that's my biggest concern, economically speaking.
Well, do you think our government currently would be allowing something like that to happen?
It's already been discussed. The Trump administration is already talking about relaxing those guidelines that Obama put into place.
Another reason to hate him.
Well, that's...
And added to the long list that's trailing down 11 Mile. Do you think that recessions or depressions can be prevented?
In theory, yeah. I mean, but sometimes we don't always know what's coming down the road, and we have to prepare, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. Just like I said, I don't think the car companies knew the type of technology that was going to be around, that was going to kick the butts of the other cars that were just made a couple of years before. Every year our cars get better, our technology gets better, and we don't need as much as we used to. Our cars stand the test of time. You can drive a car for 10 years now, and it still looks new.
Yeah.
It still drives nice, and it's not, the wheels aren't falling off on it in 10 years. You can have a nice car for 10 years, whereas you couldn't before. After a few years, you were driving a box from hell.
And, this is the final question of the section, what do you believe should be done to protect the people from economic problems?
Keep the banks, keep the strict guidelines in place on banks, and don't let the banks just give away money. And if the banks do start giving away money again, then the banks should be responsible, not the government. The government gave them an opportunity to right themselves, and I think you get one shot. And this wasn't 100 years ago. This was 10 years ago. It wasn't like it happened so long ago that none of us remember. It just happened. We're just coming out of it, so
it was barely even a decade ago.
So if we start lightening up on these restrictions again and letting people borrow against their homes again, we're going to have a repeat. Absolutely. So it's not a good thing.
All right, and this is the final section. This is another short one. It's years after the Great Recession, the legacy, and so the first question is, how has the Great Recession changed you?
Well, now I think that we things cost more now. I mean, just in general, and it's not as easy to get at. It's people are a little tighter with their money. So somebody who's in the service industry, like I was, people aren't as willing to spend money as freely. So I think that. Can you ask me the question again?
How has the Great Recession changed you?
Well, I think that you have to be better about planning for your money now, because you don't know how you're gonna make it like you used to. You used to be able to make it easy, quicker, make it up. Now you can't, so you just have to be don't spend your money on crap. You have to spend it on things that you actually need and save as much as you can.
Yeah. And so how has the Great Recession changed our nation or the world?
Well, the same way that I just said for myself, I think that people have been taught that they can't just spend money however they want to. They have to be more frugal.
Yeah. And what lessons should be learned from the Great Recession? This one.
Don't borrow against your home unless it's an amount that you need to fix something on your home.
Reasonable.
When you borrow money like that, it should be because you need new windows, you need a new roof, you need a new driveway, the foundation's correct. Something that is not only going to improve the quality of your life within your home, but improve the value of your home. You shouldn't be just, I want to borrow money because I don't like my countertop and I want a marble countertop now. I mean, that's something that you should save your money for.
Yeah, like if you absolutely need it.
But getting a high-end countertop, I don't think you should borrow against your house for it. I think you should plan for it and save for it. Yeah. But if your roof caves in or your garage falls down or your windows are drafty and you are freezing all the time, then you should say, okay, what money can I take out of my home? I need to get new windows. And you take the amount you need, you get the new windows, and then you pay that small amount back. You don't take everything that you've got and then get windows and, a new fancy car to go with them.
Yeah. And this is the final question. What would you want students to know about economic crisis?
Pretty much everything that I've just been saying. If you can't afford something and it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. If you go to the bank and you had a home for 10 years and you say, well, I really need to borrow a little money against it, and you really only need $5,000, but the bank says, I'll give you $50,000. That's
screwing you over.
Well, in the long run, it'll probably be a bad thing for you, and you have to pay that money back anyways, no matter what. So you should probably think about what you really need and take what you need, pay that down. If you need something else down the road, then you get it. But a responsible homeowner should only be borrowing against the home to improve the home. It shouldn't be for a vacation or a new car, or unless it's an emergency, life or death, you don't have a car, you can't get to work, something like that. It's but otherwise, the money that you take out of the house should be to put back into the house.
Okay. All right, and that was the interview. Thanks, Mom, for taking